Today we're spotlighting 20 nostalgic lunch dishes that once graced countless family tables, church potlucks, and school cafeterias. From creamy casseroles to inventive sandwiches, these meals defined midday comfort for generations. If you've ever wondered which flavors and recipes still spark memories of sizzling stovetops, vintage dining rooms, and the warmth of old America, you're in the right place. Number 1. Chicken divan. Originating in mid-20th century American cookery, this casserole-like lunch was built around tender chicken, broccoli florets, and a creamy sauce laced with cheddar or Gruyere. By the 1940s, homemakers relied on condensed soups or homemade bechamel to create a velvety texture that clung to each bite. Many 1950s and 1960s cookbooks marketed chicken divan as an elegant option for both casual family tables and company luncheons. Advertisements in women's magazines highlighted its warm color and crowd-pleasing aroma, ensuring baby boomers frequently encountered it at potlucks or church gatherings. During the 1970s, time-saving shortcuts, like packaged grated cheese, made it even more accessible, a reflection of the growing pace of American life. While overshadowed by quick-serve alternatives in the 1980s, chicken divan still conjures fond memories of a cozy midday meal. Modern updates might feature fresh herbs or lower-fat dairy, but many nostalgic cooks refuse to stray from the classic approach that defined home-cooked comfort for generations. Number 2. Spanish rice. Featured in 1950s promotional materials as an easy skillet meal, Spanish rice rapidly caught on among American families seeking budget-friendly lunches. This tomato-rich dish, often spiced with paprika, onion, garlic, and sometimes diced bell peppers, merged with white rice to produce a filling plate that could be prepared in a single pot. Its popularity soared in the 1960s as TV commercials showcased busy moms saving time and money by repurposing leftover rice. Baby boomers recall seeing it served alongside fried eggs or leftover roasted meats, giving midday breaks a vaguely international flair during a period when exotic cuisine began inching into mainstream awareness. In the 1970s, Spanish rice popped up in community cookbooks with variations featuring ground beef or chili powder. By the 1980s, frozen meal expansions and microwave dinners overshadowed it, but contemporary enthusiasts frequently revive this bright, tomato-forward dish as a nostalgic throwback to simpler times. Number 3. Chicken croquettes. A staple of family restaurants and cafeterias from the 1930s onward, chicken croquettes used finely chopped poultry mixed with breadcrumbs, cream or gravy, and mild seasonings before getting shaped into small patties or cylinders. The 1940s saw these crisp delights praised in household guides for stretching modest poultry portions into a heartier lunch. By the 1950s, convenience products like canned cream of chicken soup streamlined the recipe further, offering easy binding for the mixture. Advertisements in the 1960s portrayed them as dainty yet filling, plated atop a pool of gravy or served with mashed potatoes. Baby boomers might remember croquettes in both school cafeterias and home-packed lunchboxes, especially on days when leftover roast chicken needed a new life. Although overshadowed by frozen chicken nuggets in the 1970s and 1980s, modern food revivalists enjoy reintroducing croquettes with fresher herbs, artisanal breadcrumbs, and a sense of mid-century flair that resonates with fans of retro Americana. Number 4. Shrimp salad rolls. Inspired by New England's coastal fare, shrimp salad rolls rose in prominence across American lunches by the 1960s, especially in regions seeking a lighter option than heavy meat-based dishes. The concept was simple. Chilled, cooked shrimp folded into a mayonnaise dressing with a hint of lemon, then stuffed into a soft roll, often butter toasted. Baby boomers who traveled to seaside towns might recall roadside stands touting these fresh flavors, alongside soda fountains and saltwater taffy. By the 1970s, women's magazines promoted them as a classy, easy-to-assemble dish for luncheons or early afternoon gatherings. While lobster rolls remained the more glamorous cousin, Shrimp versions were more cost-effective and widely accessible, thriving in local diners. As quick service chains boomed in the 1980s, homemade seafood rolls receded a bit. But dedicated fans continue to recreate them with tangy sauces, crisp lettuce, and that briny essence once synonymous with a carefree midday treat. Number 5. Vegetable JellO molds. Though often regarded with curiosity today, gelatin-based salads and molds were common from the 1930s onward, particularly in the 1950s and 1960s. These wiggly concoctions featured diced carrots, peas, or celery, suspended in savory or lightly sweetened gelatin, lending an element of novelty to lunchtime spreads. Housewives seeking to demonstrate modern cooking techniques showcased them in vintage advertisements, often pairing them with mayonnaise-based dressings. Baby boomers recall potluck tables lined with ring-shaped or bundt-shaped gelatin creations that jiggled invitingly. Despite the slightly offbeat flavor combination, these molds represented a symbol of culinary experimentation during post-war optimism. Their popularity started to wane in the 1970s as fresh salads gained traction, and by the 1980s, many had vanished from everyday menus. Contemporary retro enthusiasts occasionally resurrect them, though typically for nostalgic gatherings, channeling the whimsical side of mid-century American lunches. Number 6. Hamloaf. Introduced as a cousin to the more famous meatloaf, Hamloaf employed ground or finely chopped ham, blended with ground pork, breadcrumbs, eggs, and a tangy sweet glaze. Depression-era families in the 1930s appreciated Hamloaf's thriftiness, making do with leftover cured meats or lower-cost ham scraps. By the 1950s, the dish appeared in countless small-town church cookbooks, often accompanied by pineapple rings baked on top. The 1960s lunch scene welcomed it sliced cold between two pieces of bread for an on-the-go meal that balanced salty and sweet notes. Baby boomers recognized Hamloaf as part of holiday leftover transformations, or as a variation on Sunday dinners. As other deli meats took center stage in the 1970s and 1980s, Hamloaf's prevalence declined, but it remains a beloved comfort food in certain regions, conjuring memories of potlucks with crocheted tablecloths and big family get-togethers. Number 7. Potato soup with crackers. Throughout the 20th century, creamy potato soup stood out as a warming lunch that nurtured families during colder months. Depression-era cooks in the 1930s favored its affordability and filling texture, often stretching a small amount of butter or milk across a family's worth of potatoes. The 1940s and 1950s saw advertisers praising evaporated milk as an ideal soup base, promoting a velvety consistency. Baby boomers who ate in school cafeterias might recall big pots of potato soup ladled into sturdy bowls, served with saltine crackers. Into the 1960s, recipes suggested garnishes like bacon bits or grated cheese, capturing the shift toward richer American tastes. While convenient soups rose in the 1970s and 1980s, homemade versions persisted among those who preferred a cozy, old-fashioned flavor. Today, potato soup remains a nostalgic taste of simpler midday routines and the promise of nourishment at the family table. Number 8. Grilled pineapple and Spam sandwich. Tapping into the mid-century Hawaii craze, many home cooks in the 1950s began pairing sweet caramelized pineapple rings with salty Spam slices to create a tropical twist on the standard sandwich. Advertisements capitalized on themes of paradise and novelty, enticing adventurous families to try this sweet and savory lunch. By the 1960s, baby boomers enjoyed it at backyard barbecues, where vibrant Hawaiian prints and tiki torches set the mood. The combination was simple: a lightly grilled slice of Spam, a juicy ring of pineapple, perhaps a smear of tangy sauce, all inside soft bread. In the 1970s and 1980s, as fresh produce became more widely available, convenience meats like Spam took a back seat, yet the memory of that playful sandwich lingers for many. Contemporary fans who crave a hint of retro island inspiration often recreate it using artisanal bread, fresh pineapple, and a nod to that golden age of backyard luau's. Number 9. Chicken fried steak leftover sandwich. Originating in the southern United States, chicken fried steak soared in popularity during the mid-20th century, thanks to the allure of crispy, battered beef topped with country gravy. Families often found themselves with leftover cutlets by lunchtime the next day, when sliding them between slices of bread with a spoonful of gravy provided a fast, hearty meal. Through the 1950s and 1960s, roadside diners served these sandwiches to hungry travelers seeking comfort foods reminiscent of home cooking. Baby boomers who traveled cross-country by car might recall glimpses of neon signs advertising "Best Chicken Fried Steak in Town." The meal thrived into the 1970s, especially in regions where agricultural traditions remained strong. Although lighter fare became trendy in the 1980s, connoisseurs of down-home cooking continued to cherish that unmistakable crunch. Today, the sandwich's nostalgic appeal persists in specialty diners, and among those craving a taste of America's rural heritage, bridging generational gaps with each crispy bite. Number 10. Egg foo young. Though not strictly American in origin, egg foo young emerged as a popular restaurant choice in mid-century America, after Chinese immigrants brought diverse cooking techniques to urban centers. By the 1950s, drive-in diners and Chinese-American restaurants began offering a lunchtime version, featuring fluffy omelet-like patties stuffed with bean sprouts, mushrooms, onions, and bits of pork or shrimp, topped with a savory gravy. This cross-cultural fusion appealed to baby boomers, who were fascinated by new flavors while still enjoying the accessible egg and vegetable format. In the 1960s and 1970s, many families recreated it at home, using leftover proteins and simple brown sauce packets. With the explosive growth of fast food in the 1980s, egg foo young's mainstream presence dipped slightly, but it held firm in neighborhood Chinese eateries where older regulars returned for that comforting familiarity. Today, the dish's significance lies in its testament to American culinary curiosity during a time of cultural blending. Number 11, pigs in a blanket. A whimsical name for little sausages wrapped in dough, this lunch or snack captured the hearts of children and adults alike by the 1950s. The concept was simple. Use crescent roll dough or biscuit dough to envelop cocktail franks or regular hot dogs, then bake until golden. Baby boomers attending birthday parties or casual get-togethers recall trays of these bite-sized treats set out for communal enjoyment, accompanied by bright bowls of ketchup and mustard. By the 1960s, women's magazines suggested pairing them with side salads or fruit cocktails for a quick lunch. Their popularity soared through the 1970s thanks to convenience packaging. While overshadowed by sophisticated canapés in the 1980s, pigs in a blanket remain an enduring symbol of playful, crowd-friendly dining that still elicits a smile from those who grew up popping them straight from hot baking sheets into lunch plates. Number 12, Biscuit Impossible Quiche. During the 1970s, Biscuit mix soared in popularity for its ability to produce quick pastries, pancakes, and pies. One iconic lunch dish that emerged was the so-called Impossible Quiche, a cheese and egg casserole using biscuit in place of a traditional crust. Housewives could stir together eggs, milk, shredded cheese, chopped onions, bacon bits, and a measured portion of biscuit, then pour the mixture into a pie plate. As it baked, the crust magically formed, giving the illusion of a well-constructed quiche. Retro advertisements stressed the dish's simplicity and reliability, appealing to baby boomer mothers juggling busy schedules. By the 1980s, fast food breakfast items took some of the spotlight away, but the Impossible Quiche stands as a distinct memory of the creative convenience that defined 1970s suburban homes. Those longing for an easy lunch reminiscent of mom's or grandma's table often dust off this recipe for a quick, nostalgic fix. Number 13, Chicken Mornay. Popular among slightly more upscale luncheons in the 1950s and 1960s, Chicken Mornay draped shredded chicken or chicken chunks in a creamy cheese sauce typically made from Gruyere or Parmesan. Some families served it over noodles or rice, while restaurants garnished it with toasted breadcrumbs for added texture. Magazines highlighted its refined European flair, reflecting an era when continental cuisine signaled sophistication. Baby boomers who visited department store dining rooms or posh luncheon spots might recall its aroma wafting from the kitchen doors. As diners in the 1970s and 1980s opted for simpler sandwiches or salads, Chicken Mornay lost traction, lingering mostly in special occasion cookbooks. Currently, gastronomic explorers occasionally dust off the recipe to relive that silky combination of cheese sauce and poultry, acknowledging the mid-century quest for a bit of old-world elegance in everyday American meals. Number 14, baked beans with Franks. Straight out of 1950s kitchen shortcuts, baked beans with sliced hot dogs was a lunch that appealed to families stretching tight budgets. Canned beans in sweet molasses or tomato-based sauce became the starting point, and leftover Franks or sliced wieners lent protein. Baby boomers recall hearing it bubble away on stovetops in modest suburban homes as a quick fix after Saturday morning chores. Advertisements in the 1960s described the combination as both kid-friendly and weather-friendly for summer picnics or lazy winter weekends. By the 1970s, with more sophisticated recipes circulating, many still stuck by the comfort of baked beans and Franks, which required minimal prep. As brand new microwave meals captured American attention in the 1980s, this time-honored dish settled into nostalgia. Modern fans occasionally resurrect it for backyard barbecues or potlucks, preserving the memory of hearty lunches that once epitomized everyday American life. Number 15, cheese fondue with bread cubes. Though originally Swiss, cheese fondue exploded onto the American scene in the 1960s and especially the 1970s, capturing the spirit of communal dining and party-style lunches. Vintage adverts showed glamorous couples dipping cubes of crusty bread into glossy pots of melted Gruyere and Emmental spiked with wine or beer. Baby boomers hosting social gatherings embraced the novelty of specialized fondue sets, complete with color-coded forks to avoid confusion. The interplay of molten cheese, conversation, and 1970s decor made it a fixture in trendy households. By the 1980s, when convenience reigned, fondue parties declined, but certain families maintained this interactive lunch tradition. Contemporary revivals focus on artisan cheeses and rustic breads, echoing the era's love for communal, relaxed meals that let everyone linger around the table while savoring melted goodness. Number 16, jellied chicken loaf. Part of the same gelatin craze that fueled savory JellO salads, jellied chicken loaf took shape in the 1950s and 1960s, combining shredded chicken, stock, and sometimes diced vegetables in a clear aspic or gelatin base. Home entertainers impressed guests by unmolding this shimmering loaf and garnishing it with sprigs of parsley. Baby boomers might remember buffets where the loaf sat beside deviled eggs and other mid-century staples, showcasing an appreciation for inventive culinary display. Once the 1970s arrived, many turned to simpler chicken salads free of gelatin, and by the 1980s, the jellied format seemed outdated. For some, it remains a curious relic of an age when experimentation and practicality blended in surprising ways, capturing that distinctly visual approach to lunchtime fare in old American cookbooks. Number 17, baked potato bar. Though baked potatoes had long been a side dish, the 1970s saw the rise of potato bars in casual restaurants and at home gatherings. The concept was straightforward. Cook large russet potatoes, then line up toppings such as cheddar cheese, sour cream, bacon bits, scallions, and chili. Baby boomers who recall 1970s dinner parties might remember the excitement of building their own loaded spuds as a midday or evening treat. By the 1980s, chain restaurants incorporated potato bars into salad bars, further embracing the do-it-yourself approach. This customizable lunch carried a sense of fun and hearty comfort, appealing to diverse tastes. While overshadowed by fast food staples, potato bars never truly disappeared, lingering in certain household traditions and local diners. Today, the baked potato bar resurfaces in pop-up events and old-fashioned buffets, preserving that flexible, fill-it-your-way spirit of mid-century communal dining. Number 18, Porcupine meatballs. Named for the rice kernels that stick out like quills, Porcupine meatballs became a thrifty lunch or dinner option during the 1940s and 1950s. Ground beef combined with uncooked rice, onions, and simple seasonings got simmered in tomato sauce until tender. Advertisements from the 1950s touted these meatballs as perfect for stretching meat portions in tough economic times. Baby boomers often recall them in the lunch rotation, served with mashed potatoes or buttered noodles. In the 1960s and 1970s, promotional recipe cards sometimes suggested additions like green peppers, but the dish's core simplicity never wavered. The convenience revolution of the 1980s nudged them aside in favor of ready-made frozen meatballs, yet many older cooks keep the tradition alive. Porcupine meatballs remain an emblem of old-fashioned practicality, deeply associated with cozy, unpretentious midday meals. Number 19, salmon patties. Emerging from the 1930s and 1940s as a cost-conscious way to incorporate fish, salmon patties or salmon cakes featured canned salmon mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, and onions. They were fried to form a crisp exterior and soft interior. Throughout the 1950s, household tips advised using leftover gravy or cream sauces to elevate them at lunchtime. Baby boomers often found these patties served with a side of creamed peas or macaroni, forming a filling midday plate reminiscent of simpler times. By the 1960s and 1970s, local grocery ads frequently spotlighted discounted canned salmon, prompting families to add these patties to weekly menus. The 1980s saw a shift to more poultry or processed fish sticks, but those who missed this old standby occasionally whipped up a batch for nostalgia's sake. Modern versions might incorporate fresh herbs or lemon zest, bridging tradition with contemporary tastes. Number 20, American chopsooi. A cultural mashup that took shape in the early 20th century. American chopsooi entered countless lunch rotations through the 1950s, pairing elbow macaroni with ground beef, onions, tomato sauce, and sometimes peppers. Despite its name, it bore little resemblance to Chinese chop suey, yet it symbolized how American families adapted diverse influences. Baby boomers recall big pots of this on a stovetop, the aroma of simmering tomatoes mingling with browned meat, forming a budget-friendly, hearty dish. Advertisements in mid-century magazines played up its simplicity, calling it ideal for batch cooking. As the 1970s approached, some variations added Worcestershire sauce or cheese for more complexity. The 1980s emergence of packaged helpers and microwave dinners gradually overshadowed such from-scratch meals, but many still hold American chop suey close to their hearts. It remains a quintessential representation of mid-century American lunch culture, bridging generational memories of communal gatherings and a straightforward approach to family meals.